Browns training camp week 1 is in the book, so I want to run through some of the biggest winners and losers coming out of training camp after the first week with some non-padded practices and then eventually the pads coming on. So welcome on into the Cleveland Browns Report. Matthew Peterson here hanging out with you guys. For the start of the month of August, I want to remind everyone that we are a competitive group here at Chat Sports, and this month we have been paired up with the Steelers Talk channel for who can get the most amount of likes. So not just on today's video, but every video moving forward. Remember, hit that thumbs up button. It really does help grow the channel, and it's another opportunity to stick it to Steelers fans. So let's get into our training camp winners and losers. My first winner is quarterback Deshaun Watson. I'm not trying to be some big homer or just pipe you guys full of good news that may or may not be accurate, but everyone loves hearing good news during training camp. I'm guilty of it myself. No, I wholeheartedly believe Deshaun Watson has been a winner so far during training camp. And I'm not the only one that kind of feels this way. There have been a lot of reports coming in from a lot of good boots on the ground beat reporters who have noticed the same thing. Mary Kay Cabot, she tweeted out, Browns Deshaun Watson went 5 for 5 in 11 on 11s completing passes to Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, David Bell, Cedric Tillman, and Elijah Moore again. So we're seeing a lot of good distribution from Deshaun Watson. And look at that awesome highlight from Elijah Moore there. Daryl Ryder, whenever you get a reporter that's been pretty tough on you and critical ever since you stepped foot in the city, and they can say positive things about you, you know you're doing something right. He tweeted out, Red Zone 7 on 7, Deshaun Watson threw 4 consecutive touchdowns. Amari Cooper, Cedric Tillman, David Njoku, and Elijah Moore after misfiring on a fade to Cooper on the first snap. So he still had to get some kind of subtle jab in at the end there. But so far, early through training camp, there have been no real rehab concerns. He did exit practice early-ish one day. That's when it was downpouring, and it kind of looked like a whole wash of a day to begin with. The only thing that we're waiting to see from Deshaun Watson is the deep ball. Like, there have been a lot of short, intermediate passes. The training camp highlights so far would probably belong to Jameis Winston connecting on a deep ball to Matt Landers, who is not a big household name wide receiver, but he might be this year's Austin Watkins. So remember the name Matt Landers when the first preseason game rolls around. But nearly all gas so far from Deshaun Watson. The bottom line, though, is it's been a strong start from number 4. By a lot of accounts, and I wouldn't say a unanimous decision, but a good consensus and a good group thinking is Deshaun Watson has looked really strong so far in training camp, and it's still very early on. We haven't even hit our first preseason game, which I'm hopeful that he plays in because I don't want his first live snap in an NFL game after suffering an injury against the Ravens 10 months ago to be in week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. I like to see him get on the field a little bit, at least for just one series, one drive, one quarter at some point in the preseason. Now, before we look at our next training camp winner and loser, who do you think will have more touchdowns this year? Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson? Type the jersey number down below who you think will have more TDs. I'm typing 4 for Watson, but shoot your shot in the comment section. First loser, I should say, for training camp injuries, which kind of makes us a loser because the injury bug, it has not gone away. I hoped it would have gone away. It's still lingering around and rearing its big ugly head. So the Browns PUP list, which we have seen a half a dozen times, it was a lengthy list to open up training camp. We knew Nick Chubb, Conklin, and Wills had a pretty good shot at landing on the list. Tomlinson, DeAnthony Bell came out of nowhere, along with Greg Newsome, who's on the NFI list. That's non-football injury, so an injury or a medical condition suffered away from the team and the facility. So let's talk about these players here. Jed Wills, I think, could return sometime in the next week. Of the 3 players that were, expected suspects on the PUP list, Wills, Conklin, and Chubb, I think Wills has the quickest path to returning to the field first. Jack Conklin, I think, can return sometime in the next 2, maybe 3 weeks at the long end. I am hopeful and optimistic that we'll see Jack Conklin suit up and be activated from the PUP list or removed from the PUP list before the regular season starts. And then for Greg Newsome and Dalvin Tomlinson, Andrew Berry's own words were they're hopeful they'll have him by week 1. So I'll remain hopeful that they have him by week 1. The only other side of the coin is Both those guys suffered injuries at spots on the human body that you don't want those positions to even be banged up going into the season, right? Soft tissue for a DB that needs to rely on their agility and their quickness. If you've got a banged up hamstring before the season even starts, that's just going to make life even more difficult for you. And if you're 300 plus pounds and your knee, which supports a lot of that 300 pounds of your body, is banged up going into the year, that's obviously not ideal. So fingers crossed those guys can make some quick and speedy recoveries from their injuries. As for Nick Chubb, I don't have a timeline, but I can offer you this. Don't bet against Nick Chubb. It's not going to be a bet that cashes out well for you in Vegas. It's not going to be one that you look back at and go, man, was I right on that? Bet against Nick Chubb, Batman, at your wish, but it's probably going to backfire. So when does Nick Chubb return? I'm not sure. I'm hopeful that he'll be activated off the PUP list every single day that passes, but I'm not going to bet against Batman. That is a bet that you should make at your own risk, and it's not going to be one that I think you'll look back at and go, man, was I spot on with this one? I'm not in that camp whatsoever. Now, before we move on to the next winner from training camp, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. If you love summer baseball and want to catch a Guardians game or a Browns preseason game, a concert, or anything else in your area, you're going to want to give Game Time a shot. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. Now, one thing I love about Game Time is they offer the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app today and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, redeem code CHAT Sports for $20 off your first purchase. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Second winner, I'm going to go with wide receiver Cedric Tillman. This might not be a popular opinion or a popular winner amongst all reporters and people that cover this team or keep up with it closely, but Cedric Tillman has definitely impressed me. And yeah, there's a little bit of alumni bias coming through here because we went to the same college, but it goes all the way back to the spring where there were so many great reviews, not just from reporters, but Kevin Stefanski naming Cedric Tillman by name. We're talking about players that jumped out to him over the offseason when the players are dismissed at the end of the season and up until they see them for the first time back in the facility, which usually comes around in April. Like that February and March area is usually a time where players relax and they kind of get their body healthy. They go on vacations. They enjoy their time off, as I would do the same. But Cedric Tillman took that time, and he really made the most of it, crafting his work and putting himself in the best shape possible. So, with Jeudy missing some time due to injury during the spring and now to start training camp a little bit, Amari Cooper skipping all of OTAs and mandatory minicamp, we saw Cedric Tillman fill in more with the first-team offense, and man, did he capitalize on those opportunities. So I'm a half-glass full guy when it comes to Ced. Sure, last year from a production standpoint wasn't where we all hoped it would have been, especially when they traded Donovan Peoples-Jones away. That kind of cleared a path for Tillman to have a larger role, and ultimately it really didn't blossom into much. Now, there was a lot of turnover at the quarterback position. Joe Flacco stepped in, and I can understand why Flacco in that scenario is like, listen, I just came off the couch. I'm not here to try and nurse along a rookie wide receiver. You said Amari Cooper's your best guy and David Njoku's your top tight end. All right, I'm going to throw 90% of my passes their way. And if I were Flacco, I'd probably do the same thing. Now, the number one priority / just question the Browns have to answer this training camp and this season when it comes to Cooper is, can he replace Amari Cooper or Elijah Moore? Both of those guys are entering contract years. So can they see enough from Tillman over the next 5-6 weeks and into the regular season where, sure, I don't think he needs to be a big producer for this team to be successful. He's probably not going to have a large role on this offense if every wide receiver stays healthy. But behind the scenes, during practice, during the week, can this coaching staff and front office go, man, we've got something in 19, And when he gets an opportunity next year, when we decide not to bring back Cooper or Moore because we're so confident in what we have in Tillman, who is a fraction of the price for what those guys are going to go for in free agency, that's going to make life a lot easier for Andrew Berry to decide whether or not to bring back one or both of those two impending free agent receivers, draft a wide receiver early, sign a wide receiver in free agency. Can Cooper show enough over the next 5 weeks to gain some trust with this front office for really next year? Now, before we look at our next loser from training camp, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We recently crossed 35,000 subscribers, so thank you to everyone who joined. It's an awesome blessing to be the host of this channel, and I really don't take it for granted. So if you're looking for a free Browns YouTube channel, hop aboard, help us reach 36,000 subscribers. Second loser, it was something similar we talked about earlier, the Nick Chubb doubters. If you find yourself, whether you're a Browns fan or just a passive NFL fan in the camp of Nick Chubb coming off major knee surgery at his age for a second time, he is washed. I'm not taking him in my fantasy league. Again, do that at your own risk. I don't think it's a good idea. A few days ago, we didn't get to see, but we got to hear about how Nick Chubb was running full sprints after practice and cutting with tremendous agility. Quote, "It was remarkable," from Mary Kay. We weren't allowed to film it. Jimmy Haslam watched the whole thing and looked very pleased. It's always a little bit creepy, I feel like, when the owner's like watching very pleased. Like, they're human beings, not Madden characters, so whatever. But I refuse to give up on the notion that Nick Chubb can't return for week 1. It's first day of August. You're telling me Nick Chubb can't be back in 40 days when the regular season kicks off? He's running sprints and cutting at the end of July. I just don't think that Nick Chubb should be crossed off for week 1 already. First off, there is a good amount of precedent of, sure, not the same caliber of injury, but superstar, beyond freak athletes coming back sooner rather than later from major knee injuries, like Adrian Peterson the year after he tore his ACL. Keep in mind, he tore his ACL in December, so later than Chubb. The guy rushed for 2,000 yards the next year and averaged 6 yards a carry. Jamal Charles, the season after he tore his ACL, 1,500 yards. Like, there is some precedent to the 1% of 1% of NFL athletes making remarkable recoveries and then putting together some of the best seasons of their NFL careers. So when you look at Nick Chubb, what tier does he kind of remind you of? The Adrian Peterson, the Jamal Charles tier, or like the Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins who took a little bit longer to come back from their injuries? I think of the APs and the Jamal Charles of the world when I think of Chubb. Now, when could we see Chubb return? Like I was saying, hopefully week 1, obviously. Now, if he stays on the PUP list to start the regular season, by rule, he is out for a minimum of 4 weeks. So the earliest we could see him would be week 5 at the Commanders. So the question becomes, let's say the Browns don't think he's ready for week 1 or maybe even week 2, but they're not sure about week 3 or week 4, right? They kind of reevaluate when they get towards that time of the calendar. Are they willing to burn a roster spot on someone who's not going to play for the first 2, maybe even 3 weeks? Other guys, no. They'll just put him on IR, and they'll let him hang on IR. Even if they're probably healthy and can play, they don't want to waste a roster spot for someone who can't play for the first few weeks. Chubb, I think, is someone that is deserving of burning a roster spot. Even if he can't play for the first 2 weeks, the moment he can play, you want him back on the field. You only get 17 games. Don't play with your food. Don't play this game of, maybe we can sit Chubb for the first 4 weeks, win a bunch of those games, get him back for week 5, and still have an extra roster spot for the first 4 weeks. That's a bad idea. That's chapter 1 of a book of bad ideas. You get 17 cracks at it in the NFL. You got to make every single one count. And if your star running back can be available sooner than what you currently have him planned for by placing him on the reserve PUP list, that sounds like a bad idea. Third and final winner. I'm going to go with defensive tackle Siaki Ika. Now, full disclosure, I haven't heard or seen that Siaki Ika has been lighting it up at training camp. But a lot of times training camp is about opportunities and making the most of those opportunities, right? When your number is called, are you ready or you do need to get ready? Stay ready. And Siaki Ika's number was called. When Dalvin Tomlinson was placed on the PUP list to start training camp, Well, you just look at the rest of the interior defensive linemen, everyone shuffles up one spot. All of a sudden, it's Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson, Maurice Hurst kind of running with that first-team defense, and now Mike Hall and Siaki Ika getting a chance to elevate on the depth chart a little bit. So as they go up against better competition, can they show and prove to this coaching staff, and specifically Ika, that they can hang with the big dogs? Because last year, we just didn't really see that from the former third-round pick out of Baylor. So Ika, I think, is a no-brainer for someone that must capitalize on the extra reps. If Dalvin Tomlinson was there, Ika is likely running with the third-team defense and then probably rotating in a little bit with the second-team defense. But now he's got an opportunity to start with the second-team defense and maybe rotate every so often in with the first team. And when you get those snaps and you're lining up with the best of the best in the NFL, like Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, and you're going up against a top 5 offensive line, and you're a disruptor, and that's going to pop on film. That's going to be noticed. And you might not have had that chance if Tomlinson was standing in that spot. But the reality is he's not, and he's probably not going to be for the next 4 weeks. So Ika, for the next 4 or 5 weeks, he's got to make the most of these reps. So he's got that opportunity to show himself, and to me, I think that makes him a winner. Now, who do you think the biggest winner so far through training camp has been? Deshaun Watson's a pretty good and easy pick, but let me know who you think it is down below in the comments section. Always love to hear from our awesome viewers. To wrap up the video, we get to pick a card. We've got producer Matt Goldman hanging out with us today. What do you want to go with, Goldman?
Let's go with 6 of spades.
I like that. I don't love it, but I do like it.
All right.
I'm going to go with the king of clubs. Here we go. Ace of clubs.
Oh.
Ace of clubs. Right neighborhood. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Appreciate everyone for hanging out with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.